Welcome to the channel. I know many of you listen to these videos to relax or fall asleep, and I'm really glad you're here. Before we start today's crime stories, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. And if there's any crime story you'd like me to narrate for you, feel free to request it in the comment section. Now let's begin. Story 1. John Joseph Joubert IV was born on July 2nd, 1963, in Lawrence, Massachusetts. His family included his parents and one sister. When John was 6 years old, in 1969, his parents divorced. This event changed his family structure. He lived with his mother after the divorce. In 1974, when John was 11 years old, he and his sister moved with their mother to a new home in Portland, Maine. The apartment they lived in was not in good condition. It was messy and poorly maintained. John wanted to see his father after the divorce, but his mother would not allow it. Over time, John began to resent his mother because she was very controlling. A high school teacher who knew the family later said John's mother was a cold person who liked to manipulate situations. John felt he was never free from her strict rules. John attended school in Portland. He was a very good student academically. He made high grades and was on the honor roll. However, his social life at school was difficult. John was a shy and quiet boy. He did not defend himself when other students picked on him. Larger boys often bullied him. They pushed him, called him names, and teased him. Because John did not fight back, the bullying continued. A teacher noted that John seemed to think he deserved the bad treatment he received from other kids. To deal with his loneliness and feelings of weakness, John joined several activities. He played the clarinet in the school marching band. He also ran on the school track team. He became a member of the Cub Scouts. These activities gave him a place to belong and a way to feel better about himself. During this time, while in his early teens, John began to have very violent thoughts. He would imagine hurting or killing strangers he saw on the street. He had fantasies about restraining people and making them helpless. When John was 13 years old, an incident occurred. He stabbed a young girl with a pencil. He felt a sexual feeling when she cried out from the pain. The next day, he took a razor blade and slashed another girl as he rode his bike past her. He was never caught or charged for hurting these girls. In another separate incident, John beat up a boy and choked him until the boy was almost unconscious. John had been bullied for a long time, and in this moment, he enjoyed having power over someone else. He started to think more about stabbing or cutting people. John graduated from Chaveras High School, a Catholic school in Portland, in 1981. His early life was marked by good grades, social isolation, bullying, and some early hidden acts of violence towards other children. After graduating high school in 1981, John Joubert joined the United States Air Force. He was stationed at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, where he worked as a radar technician. He drove a tan Chevrolet Nova sedan. On August 22, 1982, John was back in Portland, Maine, visiting his mother. That evening, an 11-year-old boy named Richard Stetson, who everyone called Ricky, went for a jog on the Back Cove Trail. John Joubert was in the area. He approached Ricky Stetson. He then attacked the boy. He stabbed Ricky, strangled him, and bit him on the body. John tried to remove the boy's clothes, but did not complete the act. He left Ricky's body on the side of a highway called Interstate 295. The next day, a person driving a car found the body. The police were called. They found the bite mark on the victim. They arrested a different suspect for this crime, but that man's teeth did not match the bite. He was let go after a long time. The police had no other suspects. In September of 1983, John Joubert was living in Nebraska. On Sunday, September 18th, a 13-year-old boy named Danny Joe Eberly was delivering newspapers in his neighborhood in Bellevue. He delivered the Omaha World Herald. John Joubert had seen the boy before. On previous days, John had followed Danny's brother, who also delivered papers in his tan car. On this day, John focused on Danny. Danny had only delivered 3 newspapers from his bag when he stopped at a house for his 4th delivery. His bicycle and the rest of the papers were left at this spot. John Joubert approached Danny at this location. He showed Danny a knife and put his hand over the boy's mouth. He told Danny to come with him to his car. Danny obeyed because he was scared of the knife. John drove Danny to a gravel road outside of Bellevue. He took Danny out of the car. He made the boy take off his clothes, leaving only his underwear. He used rope to tie Danny's hands and feet. He put surgical tape over Danny's mouth. John then used his knife to cut Danny many times. These cuts were meant to cause pain and fear before death. Finally, John stabbed Danny 9 times. He left the body in a field of tall grass. Danny's family reported him missing when he did not come home. After a search lasting 3 days, a person found Danny's body. The police and the FBI investigated because taking someone across state lines is a federal crime. They questioned many people, including a man who had hurt other boys. That man failed a lie detector test, and his alibi was false, but he did not fit the profile the FBI had for the killer. They let him go because there was no evidence linking him to Danny Eberly. On December 2nd, 1983, another boy disappeared in a town near Bellevue called Papillion. The boy was 12-year-old Christopher Walden. He was walking near his home. Witnesses saw a white man in a tan car in the area. John Joubert was driving around. He saw Christopher walking. He drove up to Christopher and showed him the sheath for his knife. A sheath is a holder for a knife. John ordered Christopher to get into the car. Christopher, feeling threatened, got in. John drove to a remote area near some railroad tracks. He told Christopher to take off his clothes, which the boy did, leaving only his underwear. John then told Christopher to lie down in the snow. Christopher refused to lie down. A physical struggle began. John was stronger and overpowered the boy. He then stabbed Christopher with his knife. He cut Christopher's throat very deeply. The cut was so severe it almost removed the boy's head. John hid Christopher's body in some bushes. 2 days later, a search party found the body about 5 miles from where Christopher was taken. The methods were similar to the Eberly crime, but there were differences. Christopher Walden was not tied up. He was hidden more carefully. The police believed he was killed very soon after he was taken. On January 11, 1984, a preschool teacher in Bellevue, Nebraska, became suspicious. She saw a man driving slowly in her neighborhood. She wrote down the car's license plate number. The driver of the car saw her doing this. He stopped his car and got out. He threatened the teacher. The teacher was able to run to safety. She called the police and gave them the license plate number. The police traced the license plate number. The car was a rental car. It was rented by John Joubert from Offutt Air Force Base. The police learned that Joubert's own car, a tan Chevrolet Nova, was in a repair shop at that time. This matched the description of the tan car seen near the crimes. The police and the FBI decided to question John Joubert. The FBI obtained a search warrant for John Joubert's living quarters on the Air Force Base. During the search, they found a length of rope. This rope looked identical to the rope used to bind Danny Joe Eberly's hands and feet. Special agents discovered that this type of rope was unusual. It was manufactured in South Korea specifically for the United States military. Further checking showed that Joubert had gotten the rope from a Boy Scout troop where he worked as an assistant scoutmaster. The FBI had already created a criminal profile of the person they were looking for. A profiler named Robert Ressler, along with an expert named Dr. Burgess, had studied the Nebraska crimes. Their profile described a young, white, military man who was neat, shy, and drove a tan car. John Joubert matched every part of this description. While the FBI was presenting the details of the Nebraska cases at a training class, a police officer from Portland Maine, was in the audience. He saw the similarities to the unsolved murder of Ricky Stetson in 1982. He knew John Joubert had lived in Maine at that time. The Maine police were contacted. They still had evidence from the Stetson case, including photos of the bite mark on the victim. The police took dental impressions of John Joubert's teeth. A forensic dentist compared these impressions to the bite mark on Ricky Stetson's body. The dentist concluded that the bite mark was made by John Joubert. This was the physical evidence that linked him to the Maine murder. Confronted with the bite mark evidence and the matching rope, John Joubert confessed. On January 12, 1984, he admitted to killing Danny Joe Eberly and Christopher Walden in Nebraska. He was formally charged with these two murders. He first said he was not guilty, but later changed his plea to guilty for the Nebraska crimes. In 1990, he was tried in Maine for the murder of Ricky Stetson and was found guilty. Maine did not have the death penalty, so he received a sentence of life in prison for that crime. In Nebraska, a panel of 3 judges was appointed to decide his sentence for the 2 murders there. Psychiatrists evaluated John Joubert. They said he had personality disorders and sadistic tendencies, but was not insane. The judges decided he should receive the death penalty for both murders in Nebraska. John Joubert's lawyers appealed the death sentences. They argued that the legal reason for the death penalty, called exceptional depravity, was not clear enough. A federal district court agreed with this argument. The state of Nebraska appealed that decision to a higher federal court. The higher court looked at the facts of the crimes, especially the torture of Danny Eberly. The court decided the crimes were indeed exceptionally depraved and sadistic. The higher court allowed the death sentences to stand. John Joubert was executed on July 17, 1996, in the electric chair at the Nebraska State Penitentiary. Before the execution, he made a final statement. He apologized to the families of his victims and asked the people of Nebraska for forgiveness. His body developed blisters from the electric currents during the execution. With his death, the legal cases came to an end. The families of the victims were left to remember their sons and to live with the loss, while the man who caused their pain was no longer alive. Story 2. Carey Anthony Stainer was born on August 13, 1961, in Merced, California. He was the first of 5 children born to Delbert and Kay Stainer. He grew up with 3 younger sisters and a much younger brother named Stephen. His family was an ordinary working-class family. When Carey was 11 years old, a very big event happened in the family. His younger brother, Stephen, was 7 years old at the time. On December 4, 1972, a man named Kenneth Parnell kidnapped Stephen while he was walking home from school. Stephen was missing for many years. During the time Stephen was gone, Carey's parents were very sad and focused on finding their missing son. Carey later said he felt neglected and alone during this period because his parents were grieving. Stephen finally escaped and returned home in 1980 when he was 14 years old. His return was a big news story. A television movie about Stephen's life was made in 1989. Carey felt overshadowed by all the attention his brother received. Stephen got married and had children, but then he died in a motorcycle accident in 1989. This meant that after Stephen came home, the family experienced both his sudden fame and then his sudden death. When Carey was a young child, at the age of 3, doctors diagnosed him with a condition called trichotillomania. This condition causes a person to pull out their own hair. He took medicine for it, but the condition continued. In high school, he had bald spots on his head from pulling his hair out. Because of this, other students bullied him. He often wore a baseball cap to cover the bald spots. Despite this, Carey was intelligent. His teachers and classmates noticed he was smart. He was placed in advanced classes at school. He liked to draw cartoons and even contributed them to the school newspaper. When he graduated from Merced High School at age 18, he was named the most creative student in his class. After high school, Carey did not go to college. He got a job working as a window installer at a glass company. While working there, he had a dark fantasy. He often imagined driving a truck into the building where he worked, killing everyone, and then setting the place on fire. He did not act on this fantasy, but he thought about it often. Carey's mental health was not good. In 1991, when he was 30 years old, he tried to kill himself by breathing carbon monoxide from his car's exhaust. He survived this attempt. In 1995, he said he had a nervous breakdown and was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. He received treatment for a short time and was then released. There were other incidents in his early adult life. Once, when a friend of his sister was staying overnight at their house, Carey exposed his genitals to the girl. In 1997, he was arrested for having marijuana and methamphetamine. However, the charges for this drug arrest were later dropped. To find steady work, Carey moved to an area near Yosemite National Park. In 1997, he was hired as a maintenance man and handyman at the Cedar Lodge, a motel in El Portal, California. This motel was located just outside the entrance to Yosemite. He fixed things around the motel and did odd jobs. This job gave him a quiet place to live and a routine. Carey Stainer continued his job as a handyman at the Cedar Lodge Motel. In February 1999, 3 tourists stayed at the motel. They were Carol Sund, her 15-year-old daughter Julie, and their 16-year-old family friend, Silvina Palazzo, who was an exchange student from Argentina. They were last seen on the evening of February 15th. Stainer later explained what happened. He said he saw the women and developed a plan. He used his position as a trusted motel employee. On the night of February 15th, he went to their room. He knocked on the door, and when one of them answered, he forced his way inside. He had brought a gun and a knife with him. He tied up all 3 women. He then took them from their room. He put them into Carol Sund's rented Pontiac car. He drove them to a remote area. He first took Silvina Palazzo from the car. He raped her and then killed her by shooting her. Next, he took Carol Sund. He strangled her with a piece of rope and then also shot her. He placed their bodies in the trunk of the Pontiac. He then set the car on fire to try to destroy the evidence. He kept Julie Sund alive and separate from the others. He took her to another remote location near a lake. He held her there for several days. During this time, he raped her. He then killed her by cutting her throat. The burned car with the bodies of Carol Sund and Silvina Palazzo was found on March 18th. The bodies were badly damaged by the fire. Police used dental records to identify them. Julie Sund was still missing. About a week after the car was found, the police in Merced received an anonymous note in the mail. The note had a hand-drawn map. At the top of the note, someone had written, "We had fun with this one." Police followed the map to a location by a lake. There, they found the remains of Julie Sund. She was identified through her dental records, too. The police started investigating everyone at the Cedar Lodge Motel. They interviewed Carey Stainer because he worked there. During the interview, Stainer was calm. He had no serious criminal record that the police knew about. The police did not have a strong reason to suspect him at that time. He was just one of many employees they talked to. The police did not arrest anyone. Stainer continued to live and work at the Cedar Lodge. Almost 5 months later, in July, another woman was staying in a cabin near the motel. Her name was Joie Ruth Armstrong. She was 26 years old and worked as a naturalist for the Yosemite Institute. On July 21st, Stainer went to her cabin. He attacked her. He used a knife to cut off her head. He left her body near the cabin. He took her head with him. The next day, on July 22nd, another person found Joie Armstrong's body. The police were called. This time, Witnesses told the police they had seen a specific vehicle near Armstrong's cabin the day before. The vehicle was an old, blue 1972 International Scout. The police quickly worked to find out who owned such a car. They discovered that the blue International Scout was registered to Cary Stayner. This direct link made him the main suspect in Joie Armstrong's murder. The police now focused all their attention on finding him. After witnesses identified Cary Stayner's blue International Scout near Joie Armstrong's cabin, the police began searching for him. They learned he had left his job at the Cedar Lodge and was possibly traveling. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the search because the murder happened near a national park. FBI agents John Bowles and Jeff Rinnick tracked Stayner's movements. The agents found out that Stayner had gone to a nudist resort called Laguna del Sol, located in Wilton, California. On August 1, 1999, the FBI agents went to this resort. They found Stayner there and placed him under arrest. He did not fight the arrest. The agents took him to Sacramento, California, for questioning. During the interrogation, the FBI agents asked Stayner about the murder of Joie Armstrong. After several hours of questioning, Stayner confessed to killing Armstrong. He provided details that only the killer would know. Then, surprisingly, he also told the agents that he was responsible for the murders of Carol Sund, Julie Sund, and Silvina Palazzo the previous February. He gave a full confession for all 4 killings. The police then searched Stayner's vehicle and his living quarters. In his vehicle, they found physical evidence that linked him directly to Joie Armstrong. This evidence included items that belonged to her. Based on his detailed confession and the physical evidence, the police and FBI knew they had the correct person. The legal process was complex because the crimes happened in different places under different authorities. The murder of Joie Armstrong occurred on federal land, so the United States government prosecuted that case first. To avoid the possibility of receiving a death sentence from the federal court, Stayner chose to plead guilty. He pleaded guilty to charges of premeditated murder, kidnapping, and attempted sexual abuse related to Armstrong's death. During his sentencing hearing, Stayner cried and apologized to the Armstrong family. He said he did not know why he committed the crimes. The federal judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole for this murder. The murders of the 3 women in February, Carol Sund, Julie Sund, and Silvina Palazzo, occurred on state land. The state of California prosecuted Stayner for these crimes in a separate trial. For this state trial, Stayner pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. His lawyers argued that he had severe mental illnesses, including obsessive-compulsive disorder and paraphilia. They said his family history of trauma and his own mental problems meant he was not legally sane when he committed the murders. The state prosecutors presented his confessions and the evidence. They argued that his actions showed planning and clear intent, which meant he was legally sane. The jury listened to both sides. They also heard from mental health experts who disagreed about his sanity. After considering everything, the jury found Stayner legally sane at the time of the crimes. They found him guilty on all counts, 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of kidnapping. Because special circumstances were found, such as multiple murders and murder during a kidnapping, the jury recommended a sentence of death. The judge agreed with the jury's recommendation. On August 27, 2002, the judge formally sentenced Cary Stayner to death by lethal injection for the 3 February murders. He was then sent to San Quentin State Prison to live on death row. His sentence for the federal crime of killing Joie Armstrong was life in prison, which would be served at the same time. Cary Stayner remains on death row in San Quentin Prison. The state of California has not carried out an execution since 2006 due to legal challenges about the method of execution. This means Stayner is still awaiting execution. The families of the victims have had to live with their loss, and some have expressed that his apology did not change their pain. The legal process for his appeals continues slowly within the court system. The story of these crimes concluded with the killer imprisoned for life and sentenced to death, where he remains today. Story 3. Cleophas Prince Jr. was born on July 24, 1967, in Birmingham, Alabama. He grew up in a family with both parents and siblings. His childhood in Birmingham was ordinary. There were no major reports of serious trouble or violence during his early years. He attended local schools. After he finished high school, Prince decided to join the military. He enlisted in the United States Navy. This was a way to find a job and see places outside of Alabama. He served in the Navy for several years. His service record was not perfect. In 1989, while still in the Navy, Prince was charged with a crime. The crime was larceny, which means he stole property. He faced a military court called a court-martial. In October of 1989, the court found him guilty of larceny. The Navy gave him a sentence for this crime. He served a brief time in confinement. After he served his sentence, the Navy made a decision about his future. The military officials recommended that he be discharged from the Navy. This meant he would not be allowed to continue his military career. He was released from service. Prince now needed a new place to live and a new way to support himself. He decided not to return to Alabama immediately. Instead, he moved to San Diego, California. In December of 1989, just 2 months after his court-martial, he rented an apartment. The apartment was in a complex called Buena Vista Gardens. Life in San Diego was different from the Navy. Prince did not have a steady job for a while. He spent his days without a regular routine. He sometimes visited local fitness clubs. He also began a relationship with a girlfriend who lived in the San Diego area. He lived at the Buena Vista Gardens apartment complex for several months. His time there passed without any known major events. He was just a young man living an ordinary life in a new city. In early May of 1990, he moved out of the Buena Vista apartment. He rented a different apartment in another part of San Diego, in an area called East San Diego. This is where his life in San Diego continued. After moving to San Diego, Cleophas Prince began to commit crimes. His first known violent crime happened in January 1990. He was still living at the Buena Vista Gardens apartment complex at this time. On January 12th, he entered the apartment of a 20-year-old woman named Tiffany Page Schultz. Her apartment was in a complex next to his. He entered through an unlocked door or window. Tiffany Schultz was in her bathroom, preparing to bathe or just after bathing. Prince took a knife from her own kitchen. He then attacked and killed her with the knife inside her apartment. His next crime happened over a month later, on February 16th. He attacked another young woman who lived near him. Her name was Janine Marie Weinhold, and she was 21 years old. Again, he entered her nearby apartment during the day. He got inside through an unlocked opening. She was also in a state of undress, likely related to bathing. He used a knife from her kitchen to kill her. He also sexually assaulted her during this crime. Prince continued this pattern. On April 3rd, he went to an apartment in his own Buena Vista Gardens complex. An 18-year-old woman named Holly Suzanne Tarr was visiting her brother there. Prince entered the apartment during the day. Holly Tarr was getting ready to shower. He took a kitchen knife and killed her. After the killing, he stole a ring that belonged to her. By May of 1990, Prince had moved to a new apartment in East San Diego. His violent behavior moved with him. On May 21st, he entered the apartment of a 38-year-old woman named Alyssa Naomi Keller. She lived in the same complex where he now lived. He entered through a sliding glass door that was not fully locked. Alyssa Keller was in her bathroom. He killed her with a knife from her kitchen. He also stole a gold nugget ring from her. The crime stopped for several months. Then in September, they started again. On September 13th, Prince went to a house in the University City area. He followed a 42-year-old woman named Pamela Gale Clark home from a fitness club on Miramar Road. He watched her enter her house. He then approached and entered through an unlocked door. Pamela Clark was getting ready to shower. He killed her with a knife from her kitchen. Her 18-year-old daughter, Amber Clark, was also home. Prince found Amber and killed her with a knife as well. He stole Pamela Clark's wedding ring. In each crime, the method was very similar. Prince always chose female victims. He entered their homes during daylight hours. He always used an unlocked door, window, or sliding glass door to get inside. He surprised the women when they were in or near the shower, often undressed. He did not bring a weapon with him. Instead, he always took a knife from the victim's own kitchen. He used this knife to commit the murders. After some of the crimes, he stole jewelry from the victims. Between these violent attacks, Prince also committed many burglaries. From April 1990 through February 1991, he broke into homes and apartments to steal things. He sometimes entered homes when people were not there. He did this many times in the same neighborhoods where the murders happened. After the murder of Holly Tarr in April, a maintenance worker saw a man running from the apartment building. The police used the worker's description to create a drawing of the suspect. They showed this drawing to the public. The police began to think one person was responsible for several of the killings because the method was so similar. They called the unknown killer a disorganized opportunist. They also theorized he might be following women home from a local fitness club. However, they did not know who he was. The crimes were discovered and solved because of a failed break-in. On February 1st, 1991, Cleophas Prince followed a woman home from the Miramar Road Fitness Club to her house in Scripps Ranch. The woman went inside and soon heard a noise at her front door. She became scared and ran out of her house to a neighbor's home for help. The neighbor came out and confronted Prince, who was outside the woman's house. Prince told a lie. He said he was looking for a female friend who had gone into the house. The neighbor did not believe him. Prince then left the area. However, the neighbor and the woman were able to write down the license plate number of Prince's car. They also gave a description of Prince to the police. The police ran the license plate number. They found it was registered to Cleophas Prince. Police then showed photographs of Prince to the two witnesses. Both witnesses identified him as the man at the house. Based on this, the police located Prince's car. They found it in the parking lot of a fitness club on February 4th, 1991. They arrested him there. After his arrest, Prince agreed to give a sample of his blood. The police did DNA testing on this blood. They compared the results to evidence from the murder scenes. The DNA from Prince's blood matched DNA found at the scene of Janine Weinhold's murder. This scientific proof connected Prince directly to one of the killings. This connection allowed police to investigate Prince for all the similar murders. They looked at his habits. They found attendance logs from the Miramar Road Fitness Club. These logs showed Prince was often at the club at the same time as Pamela Clark. The logs also placed him near the area where Holly Tarr was killed. Police talked to people who knew Prince. One of his friends told police that Prince had bragged about killing women. Prince also told this friend details about the crimes that were not known to the public. Police searched Prince's belongings and his history. They found that he had given his girlfriend a ring as a Christmas present in December 1990. This ring was identified as the one stolen from Holly Tarr. They also learned from his roommates that Prince had been seen with Pamela Clark's wedding ring. He wore it on a chain around his neck. While the police were building their case in San Diego, Prince traveled to Birmingham, Alabama, to visit family. In March 1991, he was arrested there on a local theft charge, unrelated to the murders. He was released on bail. A Birmingham police officer then called Prince on the phone. The officer said there was more paperwork about his bail to complete. The officer suggested Prince come to the police station to finish it, so police would not have to come to his family's home. After several hours of phone calls, Prince went to the police station with his mother. He was taken into custody there. San Diego police then arranged for Prince to be brought back to California. This process is called extradition. Back in San Diego, Prince was put on trial. The judge reviewed all the physical evidence in March 1992 and ordered Prince to stand trial for the 6 murders. His trial began later. During the trial, the prosecution showed the jury the DNA evidence, the stolen rings, the fitness club logs, and the testimony from his friend and roommates. The defense argued that there was not enough proof for some of the murders, but the jury did not agree. On July 13, 1993, the jury found Cleophas Prince guilty on all 6 counts of first-degree murder. He was also found guilty of 21 other felony charges, like burglary. After the guilty verdict, the jury had to decide his punishment. They decided on the death penalty. On November 5, 1993, the judge formally sentenced Prince to death. He was sent to San Quentin State Prison to live on death row. Years later, Prince appealed his sentence. He argued that news reports before his trial made it impossible for him to have a fair jury. In 2007, the Supreme Court of California reviewed his case and denied his appeal. The court upheld his convictions and his death sentence. Cleophas Prince Jr. remains on death row at San Quentin, awaiting execution. Story 4. Chester Dwayne Turner was born on November 5, 1966, in the town of Warren, Arkansas. His parents were not together, and they separated when he was a very young child. When he was 5 years old, his mother decided to move away from Arkansas. She took Chester with her to Los Angeles, California, to start a new life. In Los Angeles, Chester grew up and attended the public schools in the area. He went to Locke High School. However, he did not finish his education. He dropped out of high school before graduating. As a young man, he needed to find work. He got a job at a Domino's pizza restaurant. At the pizza place, he worked as a cook and sometimes as a delivery person. He lived at home with his mother during this time. His mother later moved to the state of Utah. When she moved, Chester did not go with her. He did not have his own stable home after that. He began moving from place to place. He stayed in different homeless shelters and missions around Los Angeles. A mission is a kind of shelter that offers food and a bed to people with no home. In his personal life, Chester had relationships with several women. In 1992, he began dating a woman named Felicia Collier. They had 1 child together. In total, Chester became the father of 4 children. These children were born to different mothers. After Chester's later troubles, some of these children were raised by his mother. During the 1980s and 1990s, Chester Turner was in and out of jail. These jail terms were not for murder. They were for other crimes. He was first jailed from 1987 to 1989 for theft and for having illegal drugs. After being released, he was jailed again from 1989 to 1992 for similar crimes. He was jailed once more from 1993 to 1995. In 1995, he was arrested and convicted for stealing a car. On April 9, 1997, he was jailed for attacking a police officer and for being cruel to an animal. His life continued with periods of homelessness and short-term jobs. By early 2002, he was working as a security guard at a homeless shelter in downtown Los Angeles. The first crime linked to Chester Turner happened on March 9, 1987. A 21-year-old woman named Diane Johnson was killed. Her body was found by 2 people driving past a road construction area. She had been sexually assaulted. She was strangled to death. Her clothes had been taken off. In June of 1987, another woman was killed. She was 33-year-old Alandra Joyce Bunn. Her body was found by an 11-year-old boy. She was lying naked in a pile of trash. She had many injuries on her head, neck, and body. She had been beaten and strangled. Later that year, on October 29th, the body of 26-year-old Annette Ernest was found. She was on the side of a road. She was partially naked. She had been strangled. There was then a period where no known murders linked to Turner happened. The next known crime was in January 1989. A 31-year-old woman named Anita Fishman Breyer was killed. Her partially nude body was discovered outside a garage in an alley. She had been strangled. On September 23, 1989, the body of 27-year-old Regina Nadine Washington was found. She was inside a garage. She was partially naked and strangled. She was 6 months pregnant at the time. Because the mother was killed, the unborn baby also died. Another period passed with no known linked murders. The next crime happened on November 16, 1992. A 32-year-old woman named Deborah Williams was found dead on a street. A month later, on December 16th, the body of 41-year-old Mary Edwards was found on a different street. In April 1993, a 29-year-old woman named Andrea Triplett was killed. Her strangled and partially nude body was discovered behind an empty building. She was 5.5 months pregnant. At that time, California law did not allow a separate murder charge for the death of an unborn baby at that stage of pregnancy. 1 month later, in May 1993, another murder happened. The victim was 29-year-old Desiree Elmay Jones. Her body was found strangled and partially nude in a backyard. During the police investigation into the deaths of Deborah Williams and Mary Edwards, a different man was arrested. His name was David Allen Jones. He was a part-time janitor. The police also accused him of another murder of a woman named Tammy Christmas. David Allen Jones was not a smart man and could barely read. The police questioned him without a lawyer. During questioning, he admitted he had used drugs with the victims in the areas where they were found. Based on this and other evidence, he was convicted of these murders in 1995. He was sent to prison for a very long time. While David Allen Jones was in prison, Chester Turner continued to commit crimes. On February 12, 1995, the naked body of 31-year-old Natalie Joan Price was found next to a vacant house. She had been strangled. On November 6, 1996, the body of 45-year-old Mildred Williams Beasley was found. She was partially nude and strangled. She was found in bushes next to a highway. In February 1997, 30-year-old Cynthia Annette Johnson was found strangled to death in a neighborhood. On February 3, 1998, 38-year-old Paula Donnell Vance was killed inside a business in Azusa. Several security cameras filmed a shadowy figure around the business at the time, but the video did not clearly show the killer's face. The final known murder happened on April 6, 1998. The body of 39-year-old Brenda Breeze was found strangled inside a portable toilet. This location was very close to the hotel where Chester Turner was staying at that time. In March 2002, Chester Turner was working as a security guard at a homeless shelter in downtown Los Angeles. On March 27th, he approached a 47-year-old woman named Maria Martinez and asked to borrow a cigarette lighter. He then attacked her, grabbing her neck and raping her for nearly 2 hours. He threatened to kill her if she told the police. Martinez reported the crime. Turner was arrested for this rape. Later in 2002, he pleaded no contest to the charge. Because of this conviction, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. A California law required all convicted felons to give a DNA sample. Turner's DNA was collected and entered into a state database called CODIS. In September 2003, the CODIS database produced a match. Turner's DNA sample matched DNA evidence collected from the crime scenes of 2 murdered women, Paula Vance from 1998 and Brenda Breeze from 1998. Police detectives then began a full investigation into Turner's past. They requested DNA testing on evidence from other unsolved murders of women in the same areas. By October 2004, DNA evidence had linked Chester Turner to 10 more unsolved murders, dating back to 1987. He was formally charged with 10 counts of murder in December 2004. As detectives reviewed the old cases, they discovered a serious problem. A man named David Allen Jones was already in prison for 2 of the murders now linked to Turner: the killings of Deborah Williams and Mary Edwards in 1992. Jones had also been convicted of a 3rd murder of Tammy Christmas. The police and prosecutors re-examined Jones's case. They saw that his conviction had relied heavily on his own confession, which he gave without a lawyer after long police questioning. New DNA testing was done on the physical evidence from the Williams and Edwards murders. The DNA did not match David Jones, it matched Chester Turner. While DNA evidence was not available for the Tammy Christmas murder, authorities concluded Jones was likely innocent of that crime as well. In March 2004, David Allen Jones was released from prison after serving 11 years for crimes he did not commit. He later filed a lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles. The city paid him $720,000 as compensation for his wrongful conviction and imprisonment. Chester Turner's trial for the first 10 murders began. On May 10, 2007, he was found guilty of all 10 murder charges and of murdering Regina Washington's unborn child. On July 10, 2007, he was sentenced to death. He was sent to live on death row at San Quentin State Prison. While Turner was on death row, investigators continued to test old evidence with improved DNA technology. In February 2011, Turner was charged with 4 more murders: those of Cynthia Johnson, Elandra Bunn, Mary Edwards, and Deborah Williams. He was convicted of these additional murders on June 19, 2014. On June 26, 2014, he received a second death sentence for these crimes. Turner appealed his convictions to the California Supreme Court. In November 2020, the court made a decision on his appeal. The judges reversed his murder conviction for the death of the unborn baby, based on the laws at the time of that crime. However, the court upheld all 14 murder convictions for the women he killed and upheld his death sentences. Chester Turner remains incarcerated on death row at San Quentin, awaiting execution. Story 5. Thomas Lee Dillon was born on July 9, 1950, in Canton, Ohio. He was raised in the small, quiet town of Magnolia, which is very close to Canton. His father worked in a factory, and his mother took care of the home. Thomas was an only child. The family did not have a lot of money, but they were not extremely poor either. They lived in a simple house in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other. As a boy, Thomas was very quiet. He did not have many friends. He preferred to be alone or to spend time with his dog. He did okay in school, but he was not a top student. He did not cause trouble in class, but teachers often said he seemed distant, like his mind was somewhere else. He did not join sports teams or clubs. After school, he would often go straight home or walk in the woods by himself. After he finished high school, Thomas went to Ohio State University. He studied journalism and graduated in 1972. Getting a college degree was a big achievement for someone from his background. However, he did not become a journalist. Instead, he moved back to the Canton area. He got a steady job as a draftsman at the Canton Water Department. A draftsman makes detailed technical drawings. He worked at this same job for 12 years. He was known as a reliable employee who kept to himself. In his personal life, Thomas Dillon got married. He and his wife had a son. From the outside, his life looked normal. He had a job, a family, and a house. But he had few social connections. He did not spend time with neighbors or have friends from work over to his house. His main interest was guns and hunting. He spent almost all his free time on this hobby. He bought many rifles and practiced shooting often. A key part of his behavior involved shooting animals. He would go into the woods and shoot hundreds of animals. He did not just hunt for food. He shot animals like deer, but also squirrels, birds, and farm animals like cows from a long distance. He would often boast about these shootings to the few people he talked to. He also began shooting at objects that were not animals. He would drive around at night and use a small rifle to shoot out the windows of closed stores. He would also shoot street signs and lights. He found excitement in doing this without being seen. This behavior was a red flag. Shooting at property is a crime, but he was careful and was never caught doing it. The people who heard him talk about shooting animals and street signs found it strange and unsettling. They thought he was odd, but they did not think he was dangerous to people. He seemed to be a man who was very angry or very bored, and who found his only pleasure in secretly causing damage from a distance. His marriage was not happy. He and his wife argued, mostly about money and his obsession with guns. They lived together, but they lived separate lives. He continued to work his job and come home. His life settled into a pattern of lonely routine, broken only by his secret nighttime drives and long hours alone in the woods with his rifles. Thomas Dillon's secret shootings of animals and property continued for years. Over time, the excitement he felt from this began to fade. He started to think about shooting at something new. He began to think about shooting people. He thought he could do it without getting caught because he was a very good shot from very far away. He planned to find people who were alone in remote areas. His first murder happened on April 1st, 1989. He drove his car along Tuscarawas County Road 94, a quiet rural road. He saw a man named Donald Welling, who was 35 years old. Welling was walking or jogging alone on the side of the road. Dillon pulled his car over at a distance. He took out a high-powered hunting rifle from his trunk. He hid near the edge of some trees. He aimed at Welling, who was not aware of any danger. Dillon fired one shot from a long distance. The bullet hit and killed Donald Welling instantly. Dillon then put his rifle back in the trunk, drove away, and went home. No one saw him. The police found Welling's body, but had no witnesses and no clear motive. They investigated, but could not find the killer. For over a year, Dillon did not kill again. He went back to his normal life and his job, but the memory of the killing gave him a strong feeling of power. On November 10th, 1990, he decided to do it again. This time, he went to a popular deer hunting area in Belmont County. He knew other hunters would be in the woods, and a shooting might be mistaken for a hunting accident. He saw a 21-year-old man named Jamie Paxton, who was deer hunting alone. Dillon found a hidden spot downwind so Paxton would not hear or smell him. He raised his rifle, aimed at Paxton, and fired. Jamie Paxton was killed by the single shot. Dillon left the area quietly. When Paxton's body was found, police initially thought it might be a tragic hunting accident. However, the investigation showed the shot came from a distance and angle that did not match another hunter mistakenly shooting. Just 18 days later, on November 28, 1990, Dillon committed his third murder. He went to a hunting area in Muskingum County. He found Kevin Loring, a 30-year-old man from Massachusetts who was visiting Ohio to hunt deer. Like before, Dillon hid himself, took careful aim, and shot Loring from a long distance. Kevin Loring died at the scene. Dillon escaped unseen. Because Loring was found in the woods with a hunting rifle, the death was officially ruled a hunting accident. The police did not connect this death to the others at this time. Dillon felt confident he would never be caught. His fourth murder happened on March 14, 1992. He went to the Wills Creek Dam in Coshocton County, a place where people fished. He saw Claude Hawkins, a 48-year-old man fishing alone. Dillon shot and killed him from a hidden position. This crime was different because the dam was on federal property. This meant the local police were joined by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI. The involvement of the FBI was a major change. They began to look at all recent shootings of people in rural Ohio. Because of this, they looked back at Kevin Loring's death and changed its ruling from an accident to a homicide. The police from several counties and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources formed a task force to find the killer. The task force held a press conference to ask the public for help. 10 days after this, on April 5, 1992, Dillon killed his fifth victim. He went to a fishing spot in Noble County. He saw Gary Bradley, a 44-year-old man who was fishing. Dillon shot and killed Bradley in the same way as the others. After this murder, a friend of Dillon's saw the news reports about the task force looking for a serial shooter. The friend remembered Dillon's strange boasting about shooting animals and property. The friend called the police and reported Dillon as a suspicious person. This led the police to start watching Thomas Dillon closely. While under police surveillance, Dillon did not know he was being watched. The police saw him do strange and illegal things. He went out at night and set fire to empty barns and sheds. He also killed animals on farms that were not his. The police watched him, but did not arrest him yet. They were gathering evidence. During this time, Dillon also tried to shoot another man, Larry Oler, who was out hunting. He fired his rifle but missed. Oler escaped without injury and reported the shot to the police, but he did not see who fired it. The police and FBI continued to watch Thomas Dillon. They saw him commit small crimes, but they needed proof he was the serial killer. They found a way to arrest him on a different charge. In July of 1992, Dillon made a deal with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to having 2 illegal gun silencers. A silencer makes a gunshot much quieter. For this crime, he was given probation, which meant he could stay out of jail but had to follow strict rules. A major rule was that he was not allowed to own or buy any guns or ammunition. The police believed Dillon would not follow this rule. They kept watching him. On November 27, 1992, Dillon went to a gun show in Cleveland. He bought a handgun there, which broke the rules of his probation. The police arrested him for this illegal purchase. This arrest gave them the legal right to search his home and car thoroughly. When the police searched Dillon's house, they did not find any rifles or bullets. He had hidden them very well. The police then asked the public for help. They told newspapers and TV stations that they needed information from anyone who had bought or sold a gun or ammunition to Thomas Dillon. This request worked. A man came forward and told the police he had bought a specific Swedish Mauser rifle from Dillon after the murders had happened. The police took this rifle to the FBI lab for ballistics testing. Ballistics testing is when experts fire a bullet from a gun and compare the marks it leaves to bullets found at crime scenes. Every gun leaves unique marks on a bullet, like a fingerprint. The test showed a perfect match. The bullet that killed Gary Bradley, the 5th victim, was fired from this exact rifle. The marks on the bullet from Claude Hawkins, the 4th victim, were also a very strong match. This was the physical evidence that connected Dillon directly to the murders. Confronted with this proof, Thomas Dillon agreed to talk. To avoid the death penalty, which the prosecutors could seek, he confessed to all 5 murders. On July 12, 1993, he stood in the Noble County Courthouse and pleaded guilty to 5 counts of aggravated murder. He explained in a calm voice how he had killed each man. He said he did it for the thrill and the feeling of power. The court accepted his plea. The judge sentenced Thomas Dillon to 5 consecutive sentences of 30 years to life in prison. Consecutive means the sentences are added one after the other, so he would not be eligible for parole until he served at least 150 years. This meant he would die in prison. He was sent to the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, a high-security prison. Thomas Dillon remained in prison for the rest of his life. He became sick in early October 2011. He was taken to the Prison Medical Center in Columbus. On October 21st, 2011, at the age of 61, he died from his illness. With his death, any remaining questions only he could answer were closed forever. For the families of the victims, Dylan's confession and guilty plea provided definite answers. They no longer had to wonder who killed their loved ones or go through a long trial. The case was officially solved. The task force of local, state, and federal officers was disbanded. The series of murders that had terrified people in rural Ohio was over. The story of Thomas Lee Dillon ended with the finality of a prison cell and a silent death. Story 6. Paul Michael Stephanie was born on September 8, 1944. He was the second oldest child in a large Catholic family of 10 children. When Paul was 3 years old, his mother married a new man. This man became Paul's stepfather. The stepfather was a violent person. He often beat the children. Sometimes he would throw them down the stairs. Paul grew up in a house full of fear and pain because of this violence. Paul attended local schools in Minnesota. He was not a memorable student. He did not excel in his studies or in sports. He was a quiet person who did not have many friends. His home life made him keep to himself. After finishing school, he needed to find work. He held several different jobs over the years. He worked as a janitor and in other low-paying positions. He was not a stable worker and had trouble keeping a job for a long time. As a young man, Paul married a woman named Beverly Leiter. Together, they had a daughter. Paul tried to have a normal family life. However, the marriage did not last. He and Beverly soon divorced. After the divorce, Paul lived alone. He had little contact with his daughter or his ex-wife. His life became more isolated. He lived in small apartments and continued to move from job to job. In 1977, Paul was working as a janitor at a place called Malmberg Manufacturing Company. He was fired from this job. The reason for him losing the job is not clearly recorded. After losing this job, Paul's life became even more unstable. He had less money and fewer reasons to go out each day. He spent more time alone in his apartment. His social life was very small. He would sometimes go to bars to drink by himself. Paul's habits were simple. He did not have expensive hobbies. He drank alcohol. He watched television. He did not talk to his neighbors. His family, his many brothers and sisters, were not a big part of his adult life. From the outside, he was a man who seemed lonely and without direction. There were no major events that made people notice him. He was just an ordinary, quiet man who had experienced a difficult childhood and who did not succeed in his job or his marriage. After being fired from his janitor job, Paul Stephanie's life continued without clear direction. His actions began to change. On the last night of 1980, December 31st, he was in St. Paul, Minnesota. He attacked a woman named Karen Patak. He beat her with a hard object. He hit her many times on the head. This caused very bad wounds and a serious brain injury. After he hurt her, he left her on the ground. Then he found a public telephone. At 3 a.m., he called the police. He used his normal voice. He told the police, "There is a girl hurt there." He told them the location. Then he hung up. The police and an ambulance came. They found Karen Patak alive but very badly injured. She survived the attack. For over 5 months, Paul Stephanie did not attack anyone again that the police knew about. Then, on June 3, 1981, he went to Minneapolis, which is near St. Paul. He met an 18-year-old student named Kimberly Compton. He attacked her with an ice pick. An ice pick is a sharp, pointed tool. He stabbed her with it many times. This attack killed her. After killing Kimberly Compton, he again called the police. This time, his voice was different. He sounded upset and high-pitched. He said, "God damn, will you find me? I just stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I can't stop myself." I keep killing somebody." He hung up without giving his name. 2 days later, on June 5th, he called the police again. He said he was sorry for stabbing Compton and that he would turn himself in. But he did not go to the police station. The next day, June 6th, he called once more. He said that the newspaper stories about some murders were wrong. On June 11th, he called again. His voice was crying and hard to understand. He whimpered, "I'm sorry for what I did to Compton." The police began to call the unknown caller the weepy-voiced killer. His next violent act happened in 1982. He went to the home of a woman named Kathleen Greening in Roseville, an area near St. Paul. He knew her. At her home, he drowned her. He held her under the water in her own bathtub until she died. After this crime, he did not call the police. The police did not connect this death to the weepy-voiced killer at first, because there was no phone call. Later in 1982, he went to a bar in Minneapolis called the Hexagon Bar. There, he met a 40-year-old nurse named Barbara Simons. He asked her for a cigarette, and she gave him one. They talked and drank at the bar for several hours. Barbara Simons told a waitress, "He's cute. I hope he's nice, since he's giving me a ride home." Paul Stephanie drove her home. The next day, Barbara Simons was found dead. She had been stabbed approximately 40 times with a sharp knife. After killing Barbara Simons, Paul Stephanie called the police again. He used his weepy, high-pitched voice. He said, "Please don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. Kimberly Compton was the first one over in St. Paul." This call confirmed to the police that the same person had killed both Kimberly Compton and Barbara Simons. On August 21st, 1982, Paul Stephanie picked up a 19-year-old sex worker named Denise Williams in Minneapolis. He offered her a ride. As he drove, Denise Williams became scared. He did not drive her back to the city. Instead, he drove into a dark, suburban area. He turned onto a quiet road that ended without an exit. This is called a dead-end road. He stopped the car. He then attacked Denise Williams with a screwdriver. He stabbed her 15 times. During this attack, Denise Williams fought back. She found an empty glass bottle in the car. She hit Paul Stephanie on the head with the bottle as hard as she could. The bottle broke. This cut his head and face, causing him to bleed. Her screams during the fight were very loud. A man who lived in a house nearby heard the screams. He ran outside to help. He saw Paul Stephanie trying to stab the woman again. The man wrestled with Paul Stephanie. During this struggle, Paul Stephanie stopped his attack. He ran away from the scene and drove off. The man helped Denise Williams and called an ambulance. She survived the attack. The man also saw Paul Stephanie's face and his car, which helped him give a description to the police later. After fleeing the attack on Denise Williams, Paul Stephanie drove back to his apartment. He was bleeding badly from the cuts on his head and face caused by the broken bottle. The cuts were deep and would not stop bleeding. He knew he needed medical help. He called for an ambulance to come to his apartment. Paramedics arrived and took him to a hospital for treatment. The hospital staff treated his wounds. They also followed standard procedure and notified the police about a patient with unexplained injuries from a violent incident. Police officers came to the hospital to speak with Stephanie. They asked him how he got his injuries. He gave them a story that did not make sense. His explanation for the cuts did not match the type of wounds he had. The police were suspicious. They remembered the description from the witness who fought with Denise Williams' attacker. The witness had described a man with cuts on his head and face. The police started to believe Paul Stephanie could be that man. At the same time, other police officers were working on the weepy-voiced killer case. They had recordings of the phone calls from the killer. One detective had an idea. He wondered if the man from the hospital, Paul Stephanie, had the same voice as the caller on the tapes. The police played the recorded weepy calls for Stephanie. When he heard them, his face showed recognition. He did not admit it was his voice at first. However, A police audio expert compared Stephanie's normal voice to the weepy voice on the calls. The expert found that, despite the crying act, the two voices shared many unique characteristics. This was strong evidence linking Stephanie to the murders of Kimberly Compton and Barbara Simons. The police then showed a photo of Paul Stephanie to the witness who had saved Denise Williams. The witness clearly identified Stephanie as the man he had fought with on the dead-end road. This identification, combined with the voice evidence, gave the police enough proof to arrest Paul Stephanie. They arrested him for the attempted murder of Denise Williams and for the murder of Barbara Simons. Paul Stephanie was put on trial for the murder of Barbara Simons and the attack on Denise Williams. In court, the prosecutors played the weepy-voiced phone calls. They presented the voice analysis evidence. They also had the witness who identified Stephanie. Stephanie's ex-wife, his sister, and a former girlfriend testified. They told the jury that they believed the voice on the calls was his. The jury found Paul Stephanie guilty of murder and attempted murder. The judge sentenced him to 58 years in prison. Years later, in 1997, Paul Stephanie became very sick while in prison. Doctors diagnosed him with a very serious skin cancer. They told him he had less than 1 year to live. Knowing he was dying, Stephanie decided to confess to all his crimes. He spoke to detectives and admitted to the beating of Karen Potak in 1980. He confessed to the murder of Kimberly Compton in 1981. He confessed to drowning Kathleen Greening in 1982, a crime for which he had never been a suspect because he never called the police about it. He confirmed his guilt in the murder of Barbara Simons and the attack on Denise Williams in 1982. His confessions closed the files on several unsolved cases. Paul Stephanie died in prison on June 12, 1998, from the skin cancer. His victims, Karen Potak and Denise Williams, who survived, continued their lives with the physical and emotional scars from his attacks. The families of Kimberly Compton, Kathleen Greening, and Barbara Simons received the confirmation of his guilt, but no further justice, as he was already serving a long prison sentence when he died. The case of the weepy-voiced killer was finally closed. Story 7. John Norman Collins was born on June 17, 1947, in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. He was the oldest of 3 children. His family moved to the United States, settling in the Detroit suburb of Center Line, Michigan. His mother, Loretta, worked to support the family. His father was not a constant presence in his life during his childhood. Collins attended Center Line High School. He was known as a good student and an athlete. He played on the football team and eventually became a co-captain. Teachers and classmates generally saw him as polite and intelligent. He graduated in 1965. After high school, he enrolled at Eastern Michigan University, EMU, in Ypsilanti in the fall of 1966. He majored in elementary education with the goal of becoming a teacher. At EMU, Collins lived in various off-campus apartments, often with roommates. He held part-time jobs to pay his way, including work in an office at the university and later as an inspector at a factory that made drum brakes. He was interested in motorcycles and owned several, including a green Triumph Bonneville and later a blue one. He enjoyed working on them and riding around campus. Socially, Collins was a member of the Theta Chi fraternity for a time. However, he was asked to leave the fraternity house after his roommates accused him of stealing money and personal items from them. This was not an isolated incident. He developed a reputation among some acquaintances as a habitual thief who would take things from friends and stores. Collins had relationships with women. Some female acquaintances found him to be charming and polite. Others, however, described a different side. They said he could have a bad temper and make aggressive sexual advances. On at least one known occasion, a woman accused him of forcing himself on her when she resisted. Several women also noted a strange and intense reaction he had when he learned a woman was menstruating. He would become visibly angry and disgusted, making sharp comments. He was close to his uncle, David Leake, who was a sergeant in the Michigan State Police. Collins would sometimes talk about police work, claiming his uncle gave him inside information about local crimes. He spent time at his uncle's home in Ypsilanti and was trusted enough to be given a key to look after the house and the family dog when his uncle's family went on vacation. In his university studies, Collins wrote a paper about individual will and society's rules. In it, he argued that if a person wants something, only that person can decide to take it, regardless of what society thinks is right or wrong. He wrote that the individual's own choice is what matters, not society's judgment. This paper was written for a class, not as a confession, but it showed his way of thinking about rules and personal desire. By the summer of 1969, Collins was in his senior year at EMU. He continued to live in an apartment on Emmett Street in Ypsilanti with a roommate. He rode his motorcycles, worked his job, and attended classes. To many people around him, he was just another college student. The first known crime occurred on July 9, 1967. Mary Flesser, a 19-year-old accounting student at Eastern Michigan University, EMU, was walking back to her Ypsilanti apartment in the evening. A neighbor saw a young man in a blue-gray Chevrolet slow down and talk to her twice. Each time, Mary shook her head and walked away. She was reported missing the next day. Her body was found nearly a month later on August 7th in a field near an abandoned farmhouse. She had been stabbed approximately 30 times. Her feet and one forearm had been cut off. The advanced decomposition of the body made it difficult to confirm, but police believed she had also been beaten and likely raped. Almost a year later, on June 30th, 1968, 20-year-old art student Joan Schell missed the last bus in Ypsilanti. She decided to hitchhike to Ann Arbor to see her boyfriend. Her roommate watched as a red and black Pontiac Bonneville with 3 young men inside stopped for her. The driver, who wore a green EMU shirt, offered a ride. Despite her roommate's worries, Joan got in the car. She never arrived at her boyfriend's house. Her body was found 5 days later on July 5th. She had been raped and stabbed 25 times. Her own miniskirt was tied around her neck. Police noted strong similarities to the Flesser murder. The next crime happened on March 20th, 1969. Jane Mixer, a 23-year-old University of Michigan law student, needed a ride to her hometown. She posted a note on a campus bulletin board asking for a lift. Her body was discovered the next morning in a cemetery, lying on a grave. She had been shot twice in the head with a .22 caliber gun and then strangled with a nylon stocking that was not hers. She was fully clothed and had not been sexually assaulted, but her pantyhose had been pulled down. This method was different, but because she was a student who disappeared while seeking a ride, police briefly considered a connection. For days after Jane Mixer was found, on March 24th, the body of 16-year-old Marlyn Skelton was discovered in a wooded area. She had been hitchhiking in Ann Arbor. The violence was extreme. She had been severely beaten, whipped with a belt, and tortured. A branch from a tree had been forced into her body. A piece of her own shirt was stuffed in her mouth to muffle her screams, and a garter belt was tied around her neck. Her clothes were folded neatly beside her. The savagery was a dramatic increase from the earlier crimes. On April 15, 1969, 13-year-old Dawn Basom was walking home from a friend's house in Ypsilanti in the early evening. She took a shortcut near some railroad tracks. She never made it home. Her body was found the next morning beside a road. She had been stabbed many times in the chest and genitals and had large slash wounds across her body. She was strangled with a piece of electrical cord, which was still knotted around her neck. A handkerchief had been stuffed in her mouth. Some of her clothes were later found in the basement of a deserted farmhouse very close to where her body was left. Bloodstains there showed it was the place where she was killed. Less than 2 months later, on June 8, 1969, 21-year-old graduate student Alice Callum was walking home from a party in Ann Arbor after midnight. She disappeared. Her body was found the next day in a field. She had been shot in the forehead and the hand, stabbed, and her throat was cut so deeply it nearly severed her spine. She had also been raped. Buttons from her raincoat and bloodstains found at a gravel pit indicated that was where the attack happened. The final crime in Michigan took place on July 23, 1969. Karen Sue Bainman, an 18-year-old YMU student, went to a wig shop in downtown Ypsilanti around lunchtime. The shop owner, Joan Gosch, later remembered that Karen pointed out a young man waiting outside on a blue motorcycle. Karen joked that she had just done 2 foolish things, buy a wig and accept a ride from that stranger. Karen then left the shop and got on the motorcycle behind the man. She did not return to her dormitory that night. Her body was discovered 3 days later, on July 26th, in a wooded gully. She had been brutally beaten, burned with a chemical on her neck and breasts, and strangled. A cloth was stuffed deep in her throat. She had been raped, and her own underwear was forced inside her body. During this time, from the spring of 1969, police from several jurisdictions had begun to work together because they saw a pattern. The victims were all young, slender women with brown hair. Each had been found with an item of clothing or cord tied around her neck. All but one had been stabbed or slashed. A critical detail, known only to investigators and the killer, was that each victim was menstruating at the time of her death. The police task force knew they were likely looking for one person, whom the newspapers called the Michigan murderer or the co-ed killer. The crimes caused widespread fear in the university towns. Women stopped hitchhiking, carried weapons, and walked in groups. A large reward was offered for information. The investigation into Karen Sue Bainman's murder moved quickly because of a key witness. The wig shop owner, Joan Gosch, described the man on the motorcycle to police. A patrolman named Larry Mathewson, who knew John Norman Collins from a fraternity, thought the description matched him. Mathewson knew Collins rode a blue Triumph motorcycle. He showed photographs of Collins to Gosch and her assistant, and they both identified him as the man they saw with Bainman. Police learned Collins had been house-sitting for his uncle, State Police Sergeant David Leake, while the family was on vacation during the exact time Bainman disappeared. Sergeant Leake, upon returning home, noticed strange things in his basement. There were fresh paint smears on the floor, and household items like ammonia and laundry detergent were missing. He informed the detectives, who conducted a forensic search of the basement. In the basement, beside the washing machine, investigators found tiny clippings of human hair. More importantly, they discovered small bloodstains in several areas. Laboratory tests showed the blood was type A, which was Karen Sue Bainman's blood type. The hair clippings were sent for analysis. A crucial piece of evidence was recovered from the victim's body. Over 500 short, blonde hair clippings were found stuck to her underwear. These did not belong to her. Neutron activation analysis, a scientific test, proved these hairs were a perfect match to the hair clippings found in Sergeant Leake's basement. This placed Karen Sue Bainman in that basement. With this physical evidence, along with the eyewitness identification, police arrested John Norman Collins on July 30th, 1969. He was charged with the first-degree murder of Karen Sue Bainman. His trial began in June 1970. The prosecution's case centered on the hair and blood evidence from the Leake basement, the eyewitnesses from the wig shop, and testimony from his roommate Arnold Davis. Davis testified that shortly before the arrest, he saw Collins hurriedly carrying a box from his apartment that contained women's clothing and a purple shoe. The defense argued the eyewitness identification was unreliable and that the scientific hair analysis was flawed. They presented a few witnesses who claimed to see Collins at a motorcycle shop around the time of the abduction, suggesting an alibi. The prosecution called expert witnesses who explained the hair match was highly precise. The jury found the physical evidence compelling. On August 19, 1970, John Norman Collins was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, evidence connecting Collins to the other murders continued to build, though he was never charged. His roommate, Arnold Davis, told police that Collins had been with victim Joan Schell on the night she disappeared and later called her a bitch. A distinctive Canadian silver dollar, like one Mary Flesser owned, was found in Collins' dresser. For Alice Callum, a boot print on her skirt matched Collins' boot, and her blood type was found in his car. In the case of Roxy and Phillips, a young woman murdered in California while Collins was visiting, a piece of a belt matching one she wore was found in his trailer, and pubic hairs on his sweater were matched to her. Collins appealed his conviction multiple times, arguing about pretrial publicity and the hair evidence. All appeals were denied. In 2005, advances in DNA technology solved the one murder from the series that was different, Jane Mixer's. Her killer was identified as Gary Lederman, a former nurse, through DNA found on her clothing. This confirmed police's later belief that her murder was not committed by Collins. John Norman Collins later changed his surname to Chapman. He remains in prison, having been denied requests to transfer to a Canadian prison. He continues to maintain his innocence in all the murders, despite the strong circumstantial and physical evidence from the Bayman case that put him in prison for life. The families of the victims were left with the knowledge that the man believed responsible for the terror was convicted and imprisoned. Story 8. Eugene Victor Britt was born on November 4, 1957, in the city of Gary, Indiana. He grew up in a house that was very crowded because his family was large and had very little money. Both of his parents were alcoholics. This means they drank too much alcohol very often. When his father drank, he became violent. He frequently hit Eugene's mother. The children in the house saw and heard these fights regularly. Because of the trouble at home, Eugene had a difficult time in school. He found it hard to pay attention and to learn. Other children sometimes made fun of him. Teachers noticed he was often tired and unclean. When Eugene was 14 years old, he decided he could not live at home anymore. The fighting and the fear were too much. He stopped going to school and ran away. He began living on the streets of Gary. Life on the street was hard. To survive, Eugene started using drugs. He also began stealing small things to get money for food or drugs. During these years, people who spoke with him began to notice he did not think or speak like other people his age. He seemed slow to understand things. Later, doctors would say he had an intellectual disability. On a day in April 1978, when Eugene was 20 years old, he saw a 17-year-old girl walking home from her high school. He attacked her. He took her money and then he raped her. The police arrested Eugene for this crime. In December of that same year, a judge gave him a 30-year prison sentence. Eugene Britt went to prison. He served 15 years of his 30-year sentence. Because he did not cause major problems in prison, the officials decided to let him out early on parole. He was released in August 1993. He returned to the city of Gary. After getting out of prison, Eugene had no money and no home. He sometimes slept in homeless shelters. For a while, he lived with one of his sisters. He found different jobs, but they were all simple, low-paying jobs like cleaning or moving things. He did not keep any job for a long time. He owned a bicycle. He liked to ride his bicycle around the city for many hours during the day. This was how he spent most of his free time. In the early autumn of 1995, something bad happened. Eugene Britt was hit by a train while he was near the train tracks. The accident caused serious injuries to his body. After he left the hospital, he had to use a wheelchair for several weeks because he could not walk. After Eugene Britt's accident with the train, he was angry and in pain. He could not walk and used a wheelchair. After a few weeks, he could walk again, but he needed a cane. He started riding his bicycle again. He spent his days riding around the poorer areas of Gary and the nearby town of Portage. He looked for people who were alone. His first attack that year happened on May 9, 1995. He saw a 41-year-old woman named Maxine Walker walking alone. He rode his bicycle past her, then stopped. He got off and hid near some trees. When Maxine walked by, he came up behind her. He hit her on the head with a heavy object. When she fell down, he dragged her body into a wooded area away from the road. He then raped her. After that, he used a piece of rope to strangle her until she died. He left her body there. Police found her body later, but they did not find strong clues. They did not know it was a murder. On June 14, 1995, Eugene did the same thing again. He saw a 50-year-old woman named Betty Askew. She was walking to a store. He followed her on his bicycle to a quiet street. He attacked her from behind, dragged her, raped her, and strangled her with his hands. He left her body in some bushes. The police found her, but again, they did not have a suspect. In July, Eugene Britt attacked 2 more women. One was a 24-year-old woman named Tanya Dunlap on July 18th. The other was a 41-year-old woman named Deborah McHenry on July 30th. He used the same method each time. He would ride his bicycle to find a woman alone. He would attack from behind, so they could not see his face. He would drag them to a hidden spot, assault them, and then strangle them. He left their bodies in places that were not easy to see. Tanya Dunlap's body was not found for a long time. Deborah McHenry's body was found, but police thought her death might have been an accident. During the summer, Eugene also attacked a 27-year-old woman named Michelle Burns and a 14-year-old girl named Nikita Moore. He followed the same steps. He used his bicycle to move around and find victims. He used his hands or a rope to kill them. The police found these bodies, but they were in areas where crime was common. The police did not connect these deaths to one person at the time. One of his victims was a prostitute. Eugene talked to her on the street and offered to pay her. He led her to a deserted place. Then he attacked her. He did not use his bicycle for this attack because she went with him willingly at first. The only male victim was different. Eugene said that 2 men tried to steal his bicycle in Gary. They broke it. Eugene was very angry. Later, he saw one of the men alone. Eugene was a big man, and he fought the man. He beat him and then strangled him. This was not the same as his attacks on women. On August 22, 1995, Eugene Britt went to Portage, Indiana. He saw an 8-year-old girl named Sarah Lynn Paulson playing near her home. She was alone. He talked to her and then led her into a wooded area. There, he raped her and strangled her. He left her body there. Sarah's family reported her missing. Police found her body the same day. This case got more attention because the victim was a child. Eugene Britt continued to ride his bicycle around Gary. On September 12th, he attacked a 13-year-old girl. He raped her, but she did not die. She was hurt very badly and was very scared. She ran away and got help. She told the police a man on a bicycle attacked her, but she could not describe him well. Eugene did not attack anyone after that. He went back to his normal life. He went to work and stayed in homeless shelters. Police in Portage were investigating Sarah Paulson's murder. They found small blue and green fibers on her body. They learned these fibers matched the uniform from a Hardee's restaurant. Eugene Britt worked at a Hardee's in Portage. On the day Sarah died, he had been sent home from work early. A witness saw a man on a bicycle near where Sarah lived that day. The police took note of Eugene Britt as a person they wanted to talk to. On November 3, 1995, The police in Portage went to question Eugene Britt about the murder of Sarah Paulson. They had collected the blue and green fibers from her body. They took the uniform he wore for his job at Hardee's to compare it to those fibers. During their talk, they arrested him on suspicion of Sarah's murder. They put him in the Porter County Jail. While in jail, Eugene Britt spoke to Clyde Smith. Clyde Smith was the man in charge of the homeless shelter where Eugene had sometimes stayed. During their conversation, Eugene confessed to Clyde Smith that he had killed Sarah Paulson. He also said he had killed 9 other people. Clyde Smith told Eugene that he needed to tell the police everything. The next day, Eugene Britt agreed to make a full confession to the law enforcement officers. The police interrogation lasted for 8 hours. Eugene Britt told the officers he had killed 10 people. He said the killings happened between May and September of 1995. He gave the names of some victims and described others. He drew a map for the police. On this map, he marked places around Gary where he said he had left the bodies. The police were surprised because many of these deaths had not been investigated as murders. For example, one body was found so decomposed that the medical examiner had listed the cause of death as unknown. Another had been thought to be a drug overdose. Now they started to re-examine these cases. Police officers went to the locations on Britt's map. In one place, they found bones and pieces of clothing buried in a shallow grave. These remains were sent for testing. In December 1995, dental records identified the bones as those of Tanya Dunlap, a 24-year-old woman who had been reported missing in July. This confirmation proved that at least part of Britt's confession was true. Detectives worked to match Britt's other statements with missing persons and unidentified bodies. They were able to find evidence linking him to 7 killings. They could not find enough proof for the other 3 deaths he described. The victims were identified as Maxine Walker, Betty Askew, Deborah McHenry, Michelle Burns, Nikita Moore, Tanya Dunlap, and Sarah Paulson. The attack on the 13-year-old girl was also confirmed. In May 1996, Eugene Britt was in court for the murder of Sarah Paulson in Porter County. His lawyers and the prosecutors made a plea agreement. Because of his intellectual disability, the prosecutors did not seek the death penalty. Instead, Eugene Britt pleaded guilty. The judge sentenced him to life in prison plus 100 years for this crime. After this sentencing, Britt was moved to the Lake County Jail. Police and prosecutors continued to investigate his other confessions. This process took several years. In February 2000, after all the evidence was gathered, the Lake County prosecutor charged Eugene Britt with 6 more murders and the rape of the 13-year-old girl. Britt's new lawyers said his mental state was now very bad. They argued he was legally insane and should be sent to a hospital, not prison. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation. Doctors examined him until the end of 2000. The doctors decided that Eugene Britt was sane. They said he understood right from wrong and could stand trial. The trial for the Lake County murders was delayed many times. It finally began in 2006. On October 6, 2006, Eugene Britt decided to plead guilty again. He pleaded guilty to the murders of Nikita Moore, Tanya Dunlap, Maxine Walker, Betty Askew, Michelle Burns, and Deborah McHenry. He also pleaded guilty to the rape and assault of the teenage girl. Another psychological test was done. This test confirmed he was intellectually disabled. The judge considered this when deciding his punishment. On November 3, 2006, the judge sentenced Eugene Britt to an additional 245 years in prison. The sentence was to be served after his first life sentence. When the judge announced the sentence, Eugene Britt cried. He said he was sorry for what he had done. He asked the families of his victims to forgive him. After the trial, Eugene Britt was transferred to the Indiana State Prison to serve his sentences. He was given a prisoner number. As of recent records, he remains in prison, where he will stay for the rest of his life. Eugene Victor Britt is serving a life sentence plus hundreds of years in an Indiana prison for his crimes. Story 9. Walter Ellis was born on June 24, 1960, in a rural part of Holmes County, Mississippi. He was the fourth of 6 children in his family. His parents, Leroy and Mattie Ellis, worked on farms. Life was very hard, and the family was poor. When Walter was about 5 years old, his parents decided to move the entire family north to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They hoped to find better work and a better life in the city. The Ellis family settled in a neighborhood on the north side of Milwaukee. This area had many other families who had also moved from the south. Walter's father found work in a factory, and his mother worked cleaning houses. The family was still poor, but they had a little more money than before. As a young boy, Walter was quiet around adults, but often got into trouble with other children. When Walter started school, teachers quickly noticed problems. He did not pay attention in class and had trouble learning to read. He became frustrated easily. This frustration often turned into anger. Walter began to fight with other children on the playground. He would hit or push classmates over small disagreements. He earned a reputation as a bully. Because of his fighting, he was often punished at school. He was sent to the principal's office many times. His parents were also called to the school. Walter's behavior did not improve as he got older. By the time he was a teenager, he was skipping school frequently. He would leave home in the morning, but not go to class. Instead, he wandered the streets with other boys who also skipped school. He fell further behind in his studies. Because he missed so many days and his grades were very poor, he decided to quit school for good. He dropped out after finishing the 8th grade in 1974. He was 14 years old. With no school and no job, Walter spent all his time on the streets. He needed money, so he began committing small crimes. He started with shoplifting, stealing things from stores. He also stole from cars. He was caught for the first time later that same year, at age 14. He was arrested for robbery and for trying to hurt someone during the robbery. Because he was so young, he did not go to prison. The court made him pay a fine, which his parents helped with, and then he was released. This experience did not stop him. Walter saw that he could commit a crime and only get a small punishment. Over the next 4 years, he was arrested 2 more times for theft. Each time, the punishment was just another fine. In November 1978, when he was 18, he was arrested again for robbery. This time, he pled guilty. The judge gave him 4 years of probation. Probation meant he could stay out of prison, but he had to check in with an officer and could not break any more laws. Walter did not follow the rules of his probation. In May 1979, he was arrested for having illegal drugs. However, during the case, he showed that a pharmacy had sold him the drugs by mistake. Because of this, he was only given another fine. A year later, in May 1980, he tried to become a pimp, controlling women who worked as prostitutes. He got into a violent fight with other pimps and prostitutes. He was arrested for extortion, which is trying to get money through threats. The case was dropped because the main witness against him was a prostitute, and the court did not trust her testimony. For the next several years, Walter was in and out of the legal system. He was charged with different crimes like assault and more theft. Sometimes he got probation, and other times he served short sentences in the county jail. In February 1985, he was released from jail. He tried to find honest work as a day laborer, doing small jobs for cash. But by September, he was charged with extortion again, this time against a woman. The charges were again dropped when it was learned she was a prostitute. On October 18, 1986, Walter was arrested for causing a public disturbance. When the police officer tried to arrest him, Walter fought back and attacked the officer. For attacking a police officer and disturbing the peace, a judge ordered him to spend 7 months in the county jail. He was released in May 1987. Almost immediately after his release, he was arrested again for theft. He was sent to prison for 1 year, but was let out on parole after 9 months in early 1988. In November 1988, Walter tried to steal a car. During this attempted carjacking, he harmed the police officer who arrested him. Because he was on parole when he committed this crime, his parole was revoked. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He was released on January 9, 1990. Now nearly 30 years old, he joined a drug gang called the Brothers of the Struggle. This gang sold illegal drugs and often fought with rival gangs. His time in the gang was short. In June 1990, he was arrested for selling drugs. He was convicted in November 1990. Because he had so many prior convictions, including federal crimes, he was sent to a federal prison in Minnesota. He was released from federal prison in May 1992. For the next few years, his life followed the same pattern. He would be released, violate his parole, or commit a new crime, and return to jail or prison. In December 1992, while in a halfway house, a place for prisoners to adjust to life outside, he was caught leaving without permission. He avoided punishment by telling officials about corruption among the staff. Because he gave this information, he was hired as a police informant. He gave the police information about other criminals for several years. Being an informant helped him avoid serious punishment for new crimes. Between 1994 and 1995, he was arrested several times for beating his girlfriends. In one attack, he injured a girlfriend with a screwdriver. He was not sent to prison for these assaults because of his work as an informant. In December 1997, he was arrested for attempted robbery and assaulting an officer during the arrest. He received only 5.5 years of probation. Finally, in 1998, after committing more crimes, the police stopped using him as an informant. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for reckless endangerment and served his time at the Oshkosh Correctional Institution. Walter Ellis was released from prison in July 2001. He was 41 years old. He returned to Milwaukee's North Side. He found work here and there as an unskilled laborer, doing simple jobs for cash. For the next several years, he lived a quiet life and did not get arrested. After his release in 2001, Walter Ellis continued to live on Milwaukee's North Side. He worked irregular jobs, but also spent time in areas known for prostitution. He would drive along certain streets, looking for women who were working as prostitutes. He would stop his car, talk to a woman, and agree to pay her for sex. He would then drive her to a secluded place. The first crime linked to Ellis happened years earlier, on October 10, 1986. Deborah Harris, who was 31 years old, was working as a prostitute. Ellis picked her up in his car. He drove her to a remote, industrial area near the Milwaukee River. After the sexual act, he attacked her. He strangled her with his hands. He then put her body in the river. Her body was found the next day. The police investigated, but they had no strong leads. They did not connect this death to anyone at the time. The very next day, October 11, 1986, Ellis picked up another woman. Her name was Tanya Miller, and she was 19 years old. She was also working as a prostitute. He drove her to a similar isolated location. He strangled her with his hands. He left her body in an empty lot. Her body was found later. The police saw similarities between the deaths of Deborah Harris and Tanya Miller. Both women were prostitutes, both were strangled, and both were killed in the same area within 2 days. However, without witnesses or physical evidence to link the crimes to a specific person, the cases grew cold. Ellis was not arrested for these killings. He continued his life, being arrested for other crimes and serving jail time, as detailed before. After he was released from prison in 1992, he committed another murder. On November 28, 1992, he picked up a 25-year-old woman named Irene Smith. She was working as a prostitute. He drove her to a secluded spot. He strangled her. He left her body behind a vacant building. Her body was discovered shortly after. The police noted the method was the same, manual strangulation, but again, they had no suspect. Ellis continued to avoid capture. He worked as a police informant for a period, which kept him out of prison for some assaults. During this time, he killed again. On April 24, 1995, the body of 28-year-old Florence McCormick was found. She was a prostitute. She had been strangled. Her body was left in an alley. About 2 months later, on June 27, 1995, the body of 37-year-old Sheila Ferrier was discovered. She was also a prostitute who had been strangled. Her body was found in a grassy, vacant area. Less than a year later, on June 20, 1996, Ellis killed again. The victim was 41-year-old Joyce and Mims. She was a prostitute. He strangled her and left her body in a yard near an abandoned house. The police by now had several unsolved murders of prostitutes in the same general neighborhood. All the women had been strangled. Detectives began to consider that one person might be responsible for all of them. However, they could not prove it. They did not have the technology to link the crimes through physical evidence like DNA in a reliable, quick way at that time. The cases remained open but inactive. After the 1996 murder, Ellis did not kill anyone that police know of for many years. He was in and out of prison for other crimes. When he was released in 2001, he did not commit another known murder for several years. Then on April 27, 2007, he picked up a 28-year-old woman named Withrone Stokes. She was working as a prostitute. He drove her to a quiet street. He strangled her. He left her body in a parked car. Her body was found later that day. In each of these crimes, Ellis used the same method. He would approach a woman who was working as a prostitute. He would use his car to take her to a place where no one was around. He would then strangle her with his hands after the sexual act. He did not use a weapon. He would then leave the body where he thought it might not be found quickly, or sometimes he simply left it at the scene. He chose victims who were involved in illegal activity, perhaps believing the police would not investigate as hard. He also operated in a small, concentrated area of the city's north side, an area he knew very well from growing up there. The police did not connect Walter Ellis to these murders for a long time. The killings happened years apart. He was in prison for some of the years between the murders, which made him an unlikely suspect to detectives. When he was out of prison, he lived quietly and did not draw major attention from police for violent crimes during those periods. The separate police departments and units investigating each individual murder did not have a system to easily compare all the details and see the clear pattern for many years. For years, the murders of the 7 women remained unsolved cold cases. In 2009, the Milwaukee Police Department decided to use new DNA technology to re-examine old evidence from these killings. Scientists took tiny samples of genetic material from the bodies of the victims. This material had been collected from the crime scenes years earlier and stored. The DNA analysis showed a match. The same man's DNA was found on all 7 women. The police now knew for certain that one person had killed all of them between 1986 and 2007. The police then began searching for a person whose DNA would match the evidence. They checked the state's DNA database, which contains genetic profiles from people who have been convicted of crimes. They did not find a match. This was confusing. They knew the killer had been in the criminal justice system before because his DNA was on file from an old arrest. After more checking, they discovered a problem. A DNA sample from a man named Walter Ellis was missing from the database. It had never been uploaded. Ellis had been required to give a sample in 2001 after a conviction, but the sample was lost on its way to the lab. In late August 2009, the police ordered Walter Ellis to come to the station and give a new DNA sample. He did not show up. This made the police very suspicious. They obtained a warrant to search his apartment. During the search, they took a toothbrush from his bathroom. The toothbrush had his saliva on it. Scientists tested the saliva and extracted his DNA. They compared this DNA to the DNA from the 7 murdered women. It was a perfect match. Walter Ellis was the source of the DNA found on all the victims. The police now had enough evidence to arrest Ellis for the 7 murders. They issued a warrant for his arrest. They began looking for him and his car, a maroon 1994 Buick Century. A few days later, on September 7, 2009, his car was seen at a motel in the town of Franklin, just outside Milwaukee. Police officers went to the motel. They found Ellis in a room with his girlfriend, Tressie Johnson. He was arrested without a fight. In the room, police found a small amount of crack cocaine and a pipe for smoking it. Ms. Johnson told police she was not from Milwaukee and did not know about the murders. She said she had been with Ellis because he had threatened her and she was afraid to leave. Walter Ellis was charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder. The victims were named in the charges: Deborah Harris, Tanya Miller, Irene Smith, Florence McCormick, Sheila Ferrier, Joyce Mims, and Withrone Stokes. He was taken to the Milwaukee County Jail to await trial. The district attorney announced that they would seek life sentences for each murder. The DNA match also had major consequences for 2 other men. Chaunot had been convicted in 1996 for the 1995 murder of a 16-year-old girl named Jessica Payne. He was convicted based only on a witness statement. When Ellis's DNA was run through the database, it was also linked to Jessica Payne. This new evidence proved Ott could not have been the killer. After spending 14 years in prison, all charges against Ott were dropped, and he was released in 2009. Similarly, in 2010, Ellis's DNA was matched to the 1998 murder of a woman named Marietta Griffin. A man named William Avery had been convicted of this murder in 2005. Based on the new DNA evidence, Avery was exonerated and released from prison. Faced with the very strong DNA evidence, Walter Ellis's lawyer spoke with the district attorney. They discussed a plea agreement. In February 2011, Ellis agreed to plead guilty to all 7 murders. By pleading guilty, he avoided a trial. He admitted in court that he had committed each of the killings. The families of the victims agreed to this plea deal because it guaranteed a punishment and meant they would not have to endure a long trial. On February 24, 2011, a judge sentenced Walter Ellis to 7 consecutive life sentences in prison. This meant he would never be eligible for parole. He would die in prison. After his sentencing, Ellis was transferred to a prison in another state to serve his sentence. He was sent to the South Dakota State Penitentiary. Not long after arriving, his health began to fail. He was diagnosed with diabetes. He was treated in the prison hospital, but the disease caused serious complications. On December 1, 2013, Walter Ellis died in the prison hospital from these complications. He was 53 years old. The families of his victims continued with their lives, knowing the man who killed their loved ones had been caught and punished. The 2 wrongfully convicted men, Chaunot and William Avery, sued the state for their wrongful imprisonment and received settlements. The Milwaukee Police Department changed its procedures for handling DNA samples to ensure evidence could not be lost in the future. The case of the Milwaukee North Side Strangler was officially closed. Story 10. Billy Richard Glaze was born on July 13, 1943. The place of his birth is not widely recorded, but he grew up in the United States during a time of great change after World War II. His family life was not stable. He moved around frequently as a child. This meant he did not have a permanent home or long-term friends in one town. As a boy, Billy did not do well in school. He often missed classes and struggled with his lessons. He left school at a young age without graduating. Without an education, it was difficult for him to find good work. He began taking odd jobs that required little skill, like helping on trucks or doing basic repairs. When he became a teenager, Billy Glaze started to get into trouble. He was first arrested for small crimes like theft or causing disturbances. These early arrests did not lead to long prison sentences, but they put him in contact with the police for the first time. This pattern of small crimes continued into his early adult years. In his 20s, Billy Glaze began to travel more. He lived a drifting life, moving from state to state. He would work for a short time in one place, then move on. He did not have a wife or children. He spent most of his time alone, or with temporary acquaintances he met on the road. During this period, he developed habits of drinking alcohol heavily. A major event happened in 1974 in Texas. Billy Glaze was arrested and convicted for the crime of rape. He was sent to prison for this. He served a part of his sentence and was later released on parole. Parole means he was let out of prison early, but had to follow strict rules and report to an officer. One of the rules was that he could not leave the state of Texas without permission. However, Billy Glaze did not follow these rules. After his release, he soon began traveling again, breaking the conditions of his parole. He drove across the country, taking various jobs that paid in cash. He continued his drifting lifestyle, staying in cheap motels or sometimes sleeping in his truck. He had very few possessions and no permanent address. This was his life leading into the 1980s. He was a man with a criminal record, no stable home, no family ties, and a habit of moving from place to place without telling anyone. He lived on the edges of society, mostly unnoticed. Billy Glaze arrived in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the mid-1980s. He found the city to be a place where he could blend in. He continued to live a transient life, staying in low-cost boarding houses or his vehicle. He frequented bars and areas of the city, known for prostitution and heavy drinking. Between 1985 and 1987, 3 Native American women were murdered in Minneapolis. The first woman was killed in 1985. She was found in a secluded area near the city. She had been beaten and strangled. The police investigation showed she had been socially isolated and spent time in the same bars that Billy Glaze visited. At the time, her murder was not solved. The second woman was killed in 1986. She was also a Native American woman who lived a high-risk lifestyle, often walking alone at night in areas known for crime. Her body was discovered in a similar secluded location. The method was like the first murder, a violent beating and strangulation. Police began to see a possible connection because both victims were from similar backgrounds and were killed in a similar way. They started to consider that one person might be responsible for both deaths. The third woman was murdered in early 1987. She was another Native American woman. Her body was found near a riverbank. She had also been beaten and strangled. The police now strongly believed a serial killer was targeting vulnerable women in the city. They formed a special task force to investigate the 3 murders together. During this time, Billy Glaze continued to live in Minneapolis. He often talked to people in bars. He sometimes boasted about violence. In one bar, a waitress heard him make disturbing comments about hurting women. The waitress became worried. She contacted the police and told them about this man named Billy Glaze who drove a distinctive truck and made violent boasts. This gave the police a specific person to look for. At the same time, a woman who was in a short relationship with Billy Glaze spoke to the police. She told them that Glaze had shown violent tendencies and owned tools that could be used as weapons. She also told police that Glaze had talked about leaving Minnesota soon and heading to the southwest United States. The police now focused on finding Billy Glaze. They learned he had a long criminal record from other states, including the rape conviction in Texas. They also learned he was violating his parole by being in Minnesota. They tried to locate him in Minneapolis, but he had already left the city. Based on the information from his former girlfriend, police thought he might be traveling to New Mexico. On August 31, 1987, police officers in New Mexico stopped a truck for driving in an erratic manner. The driver was Billy Glaze. He was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. When the officers ran his name, they discovered he was wanted for questioning in Minnesota regarding the murders and that he was a parole violator from Texas. During a search of his truck, the officers found a crowbar, a nightstick, and a shirt with stains that appeared to be blood. Billy Glaze was extradited back to Minnesota to face charges for the 3 murders. The police built their case against him using several key pieces of evidence. The most important physical evidence was the crowbar from his truck. Forensic experts testified that hairs found on the crowbar were microscopically similar to hairs from one of the murder victims. The blood on the shirt was also presented as evidence, though testing at the time could only confirm it was human blood, not whose blood it was. The prosecution also relied on witness testimony. The waitress who had originally reported him testified about his violent boasts. His former girlfriend testified about his behavior and his possession of possible weapons. Another witness, a man who had been in prison with Glaze, claimed that Glaze had confessed to the murders while in jail awaiting trial. The defense argued that the evidence was weak. They said the hair analysis was not definitive proof. They pointed out that no direct evidence, like fingerprints or semen, linked Glaze to the crime scenes. They suggested Glaze was a target because of his past record and his transient lifestyle. In 1989, Billy Glaze was convicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder. The jury found the combination of the hair evidence, the witness statements, and his possession of the potential weapons to be convincing. At his sentencing, he continued to say he was innocent. He was given a sentence of life in prison with a minimum of 52.5 years before he could be considered for parole. He was sent to a prison in Delaware to serve his sentence. Years later, in 2009, the Innocence Project took an interest in his case. They used new DNA technology to test old evidence from the crimes. Semen from a rape kit taken from one of the victims was tested. The DNA did not match Billy Glaze. Instead, it matched another man, a convicted rapist from Minnesota. In 2014, more testing was done on a cigarette, but found near the body of a second victim. The DNA on the cigarette also matched the same convicted rapist, not Billy Glaze. Glaze's lawyers filed a motion for a new trial based on this DNA evidence. They also challenged the reliability of the prison informant who had claimed Glaze confessed. In response to these findings, the Minneapolis police and the county attorney's office reopened the investigation into the 3 murders to examine the new suspect. Billy Glaze never got a new trial. He was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer in 2015. He died in prison on December 22, 2015, at the age of 72, while the reinvestigation into the murders was still ongoing. The case against him remains officially unresolved, though the DNA points to another man. He died in prison maintaining his innocence, after new evidence emerged that another man was responsible.